So today we are going to talk about representation, representations representation of a vector. So how do you represent a vector when you're talking mathematically? So a vector can be represented represented by a straight line with an arrowhead with an arrowhead with an arrowhead. So just reading it might be a bit confusing. So if I have to show it, I will show it like this. So this is a vector. Let's change its color to white and let's make it a little bit thicker. So this is a vector. It's a straight line. So it's a straight line from here to here. It's a straight line with an arrowhead. Yeah? So now let's talk about what does the straight line and the arrowhead represent. So the length of straight line gives the magnitude, whereas 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 the arrowhead whereas the arrowhead gives gives the direction of the vector. Suppose this is north, which will mean north. This will mean south, north, south, east, west. Suppose um, this one block, right, this one, suppose this is 1 Newton. So we are talking about this will consider as 1 unit. So 1 Newton. So let's talk about force. It can be anything, but let's talk about force. Suppose it is like this. This would mean this length covers 1, 2, 3, 4. It covers 4 units, which means it is 4 Newton. So this length is 4 Newton. So this length represents the magnitude 4 Newton and the arrowhead represents the direction. So it will be east. So it represents 4 Newton east. Suppose the arrowhead was like this, then you would have to do some math, but it's pretty simple. It's gonna you can still find it out. It's not gonna be as easy as this since you could just count the units. In this case, you can't count it pretty easily, but you can still do it. So it can be in any rotation. So this is me showing vectors that can be the conditions that the vectors can be in. It can be here, 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 or anywhere in between, and in any way as well. So now let's look at an example which will a little bit more complex than this, but it will make it much more easier for you to understand. So first of all, let's draw a figure. Let's draw the figure like this. This is supposed to be up 90 degree, but it's not 90 degree. Just think of it as 90 degree. Let's make a vector. This is a vector, and let's make it another color to make it stand out, and let's make it a little bit bigger as well. So this is a vector, and this vector is going to be a force. I generally use force since it's much more easier. Let's suppose the start of the vector as point A and the end of the vector as point B. Let's suppose this angle, it's going to be 45 degrees, and we are given that the magnitude of force is 10 Newton, and this is the force. This is the force, right? Now, in the given, so in the given vector, So how would you represent it? It will represent EB, so that's the distance, and you will put an arrowhead over both of them, which means from A to B. If it was from B to A, you would do BA and put an arrow over it. Represents the force vector. Since force the vector, the force vector of magnitude 10 newtons acting at an angle of 45 degrees with positive x-axis. So wait a second, I did not make the axis, so we would have to make the axis. So let's make it with this color. Let's suppose this is x, this is y. So with the positive x-axis, since this is plus, and if you go right over here, this will be negative x-axis. And so if you had to talk about angle with y-axis, this will be the angle with positive y-axis. It will still be 45. So this will still be 45. So the angle between positive x-axis and positive y-axis is still going to be the same. But we talked about, when we are talking about diagrams, how to represent vector. But how do you represent it mathematically? So we can also represent a vector by a letter or alphabet with an arrow over it. But there are various ways to represent a vector. For example, this is a vector where I'm using the small letter. This is also a vector where I'm using the big letter. This is also a vector where I'm using 2 letters. So let's make this another letter so that it's much more easier. Another one you would see is using symbols. So this is also a vector. Also sometimes slanted. It's also written as slanted, and make bold. So make bold. So it's much more thicker as well sometimes. I think I have a thicker pen. So it's sometimes written thicker. I'm generally gonna use these 2 methods in my lectures, since I'm most comfortable with these 2, or these 4, let's say. Yeah, these 4 are the ones that I will use the most. So these are my representations for vectors, but it does not mean that the others are wrong. It just means that I don't prefer the other ones. So that's it for today's video. In the next video, we are going to talk about the types of vectors. Till then, bye bye.